Riley Moss had survived 3 days in flooded caves back on Earth. She had walked through wildfires in the Australian outback. She had faced down charging wildlife that weighed twice her size. None of that prepared her for the moment when the floor of the research station started shaking like the universe itself was having a seizure. The orbital station Meridian 7 had been quiet for 6 months. 17 different species worked together, studying the dead planet below. They took samples, ran tests, and filed reports. Boring work, mostly. Riley handled security, which meant she spent most days checking door seals and making sure the equipment stayed locked down. She liked boring. Boring meant everyone stayed alive, but boring ended when the sensors went crazy. Riley was in the security office when the alarm started. Red lights flashed across every screen. The planet below, the one they all thought was dead and cold, suddenly showed massive seismic activity. Something was moving down there, something big enough to register on orbital sensors. She ran to the command center. The research director, a Paulian named Orten, was already barking orders. Paulians looked like walking crabs with too many eyes, and right now all of those eyes were wide with fear. "Evacuation protocols now," Orten shouted. "Everyone to the escape pods. This is not a drill." The crew moved fast. 17 species meant 17 different ways of panicking, but they all understood danger. Riley started directing traffic, making sure the slower species got moving first. The aquatic ones needed help with their pressure suits. The small ones needed someone to carry their equipment. That's when Pip found her. Pip was young, barely an adult by Fenari standards. Her species looked like foxes that learned to walk upright and developed opposable thumbs. She grabbed Riley's arm with both small paws, her eyes huge and wet. "Dr. Hallis is still down there," Pip said. Her voice shook. "On the planet. In the underground outpost. Communications are dead." The seismic activity cut him off. Riley felt something cold settle in her stomach. Hallis was Pip's mentor, a Quillan scientist studying the planet's geology. Quillans had crystalline bones, delicate and beautiful, but fragile. If the outpost was collapsing, Hallis wouldn't survive long. "Where's the commander?" Riley asked. "Already gave the order," Pip said. She was crying now. "No rescue attempts. Too dangerous. We evacuate and leave him." Riley looked at the main view screen. The planet below was splitting open. Massive cracks spread across the surface like a broken eggshell. Whatever was down, there was waking up, and it was angry. She did the math in her head. The electromagnetic interference would make orbital extraction impossible within 2 hours. The escape pods needed a launch in the next 30 minutes to avoid the expanding danger zone. A rescue mission would take at least 90 minutes round trip. The numbers didn't work. Riley started walking toward the shuttle bay anyway. "Where are you going?" Pip called after her. "To get Hallis." She found Orten near the main airlocks, coordinating the evacuation. He saw her heading for the shuttles, and his carapace flushed dark red, the Paulian color for fury. "Security Officer Moss, you are ordered to board an escape pod immediately." "Dr. Hallis is still on the surface," Riley said. She kept walking. "I am aware." Orten moved to block her path. "The rescue window has closed. It's unfortunate, but we cannot risk more lives for one individual." "That's an order." Riley stopped. She looked at Orten, then at the other crew members rushing past. She thought about Hallis, alone in a collapsing research station, his fragile bones probably already breaking under falling debris. She thought about Pip's tears. "With respect, Commander, I disagree. This isn't a debate, Moss. Stand down." "No." The word hung in the air between them. Around them, the evacuation continued. Species Riley had worked with for 6 months rushed past, some glancing at the confrontation, but none stopping. They all had survival instincts screaming at them to run, that Riley's instincts were screaming too. But Earth had taught her something different. Sometimes you ran toward danger, not away from it. "You're relieved of duty," Orten said. His voice went quiet and cold. "If you take that shuttle, you'll face court-martial. Your career is over." "Then I guess I don't have a career anymore." Riley pushed past him. She heard him shouting behind her, ordering security to stop her. But the security team was busy helping with evacuation, and Riley was already running. She'd always been fast, faster than most species could process. By the time anyone reacted, she was in the shuttle bay. The descent shuttle was a small craft, designed for quick trips to the planet's surface. Riley strapped in and started the launch sequence. Her hands moved across the controls with practiced precision. 6 months of boredom meant she'd run every drill 100 times. The shuttle bay doors opened. The planet filled her view, all cracked surface and venting gases. It looked like a vision of hell. Moss, abort immediately. Orthan's voice crackled through the comm. That's a direct order. You are not authorized for launch. Riley reached over and cut the communication channel. The silence felt better. She fired the engines and dropped toward the planet, leaving Meridian 7 and its screaming alarms behind. The shuttle shook as it hit the atmosphere. Electromagnetic interference made the controls fight her, but Riley had flown through Earth's hurricanes during her training. This was just another storm. The research outpost came into view through the viewport. Half of it had already collapsed into a canyon. The rest hung on the edge, barely stable. Riley could see cracks spreading through the ground around it. She had maybe 10 minutes before the whole thing fell. Riley gritted her teeth and angled for landing. The shuttle's automated systems screamed warnings at her. She disabled them one by one. Hallis better be alive, she muttered to herself. Or, this is going to be really embarrassing. The shuttle touched down on the only stable ground left, a small plateau already showing fracture lines. Riley grabbed an emergency kit and ran for the outpost entrance. Behind her, the ground groaned like a living thing. Something massive moved in the depths below. She could feel it through her boots, a vibration that spoke of impossible size. Whatever was down, there was waking up, and Riley had just landed right on top of it. The research outpost looked like someone had taken a building and shaken it like a box of toys. Riley stepped through the airlock into chaos. Equipment hung from broken mountings. The lights flickered on emergency power. Somewhere in the structure, metal screamed as it tore apart. "Hallis," Riley shouted. "Where are you?" No answer. The communication system was dead, just conduits and sparking wires. Riley pulled out a handheld scanner from her emergency kit. It took 3 tries to get it working through all the interference, but finally it showed a life sign. The main lab, 2 levels down. She ran through corridors that tilted at wrong angles. The whole structure groaned around her. Twice she had to climb over collapsed sections, pulling herself through gaps that most species wouldn't fit through. Being compact had advantages. The main lab was a disaster. The ceiling had partially caved in, bringing half the equipment with it. And there, pinned under a massive analysis console, was Dr. Hallis. The Quillen looked bad. His crystalline structure caught the emergency lights, showing fractures running through his left side. His species' bones were beautiful but fragile, more like structured glass than the bones Riley carried. The collapse had shattered him. "Hallis," Riley dropped to her knees beside him. "Can you hear me?" His eyes focused slowly. Quillens had eyes like cut gems, multifaceted and strange. Right now, they were clouded with pain. "You came," he whispered. His voice sounded like wind chimes breaking. "Foolish Deathworlder." "Yeah, well, it's kind of my thing." Riley examined the equipment pinning him. The console weighed at least 400 kilograms, probably more. Standard rescue protocol said to wait for heavy lift equipment or drone assistance. They had neither, and the building was falling apart. Riley did the math. The console was pinning Hallis across the chest and left side. If she could get leverage under the right corner, shift the weight to the structural supports, she might be able to lift it enough for him to slide free. The effort would probably tear muscles in her back and shoulders. Most species would rupture internal organs attempting it. Good thing she was human. "This is going to hurt," Riley said. "Both of us." She positioned herself at the corner of the console, found a support beam to brace against, and started to lift. Her legs burned. Her back screamed. Every muscle in her body told her this was impossible. She lifted anyway. The console shifted 2 centimeters, then 5, then 10. "Slide out," Riley gasped. "Now." Hallis tried to move. His shattered side scraped against the floor. He made a sound of pure agony, but kept sliding. Riley's vision started to go dark at the edges. She'd lifted heavier things before, but never while her body was screaming that she was about to break something important. Hallis cleared the console. Riley let it drop and fell to her knees, breathing hard. That's when the floor disappeared. The ground beneath the outpost suddenly dropped 3 meters. Riley grabbed Hallis and rolled them both toward the wall as the center of the lab floor collapsed entirely. They stopped at the edge of a massive hole that hadn't been there 3 seconds ago. And through that hole, Riley saw it. Something vast moved in the darkness below. Not rock, not machinery, something alive. It had surfaces that caught the light wrong, textures that didn't match anything in Riley's experience. A part of it rose up, something that might have been an appendage or might have been something else entirely. It was the size of a building. What is that? Riley breathed. Primordial, Hallis whispered beside her. His voice was fading. Ancient. My research. The planet isn't dead. It's an egg. That thing has been sleeping for millions of years. Now it's hatching. The appendage smashed through what was left of the lab floor, reaching upward. The entire outpost lurched. Riley didn't think. She grabbed Hallis in a fireman's carry and ran. The corridors were collapsing now, not slowly but in real time. Riley jumped gaps that opened in front of her. She ducked under falling beams. Hallis weighed maybe 60 kilograms, light for his size because of his crystalline structure. Still heavy enough when you're running through a building that's actively trying to kill you. Behind them, the appendage crashed through walls, tearing the outpost apart. It seemed to be searching for something. Riley didn't want to know what. She burst out of the main entrance and onto the plateau where she'd landed the shuttle. The ground was splitting open in massive cracks. Her shuttle sat on the far side of the plateau, maybe 40 meters away. It might as well have been on another planet. The plateau started to tilt. Riley ran anyway. Hallis bounced on her shoulder, unconscious now from pain and shock. She could feel the ground breaking apart under her boots. Each step was a gamble that the surface would hold for one more second. She reached the shuttle with the plateau collapsing behind her. The airlock was open. Riley threw herself and Hallis inside and slammed the emergency close. Through the viewport, she watched the plateau break into pieces and fall into darkness. Okay, Riley panted. Step 1 complete. Got the scientist. She strapped Hallis into the co-pilot's seat and checked his vitals. Bad but stable. Then she looked at the shuttle controls and her heart sank. The landing struts were caught in a fissure. The hull integrity was holding, but the struts were bent and jammed. The engines could probably break them free, but the force would destroy the landing gear completely. Without landing gear, she couldn't dock properly with Meridian 7. They'd be stuck in a shuttle with maybe 6 hours of life support. Through the viewport, the planet's surface continued to break apart. The primordial was emerging, and it was bigger than Riley had imagined. Appendages the size of mountains pushed up through the crust. Riley made a decision. She'd made impossible choices before. This was just one more. She fired all engines at maximum thrust. The shuttle screamed in protest. Metal tore. The landing struts ripped away completely, sparking and breaking. But the shuttle lurched upward, free of the dying planet. Riley aimed for orbit and didn't look back. Behind her, the research outpost collapsed entirely into the expanding chasm. The thing that was hatching reached for the sky. Hallis, Riley said to the unconscious Quillen. I really hope you're worth a court-martial. The shuttle climbed toward space, trailing debris and with half its systems flashing red warnings. But it climbed. Sometimes that was enough. Space should have been safer than the planet's surface. It wasn't. Riley fought the damaged shuttle through the thickest part of the atmosphere, while alarms screamed about hull integrity and engine stress. Hallis remained unconscious in the co-pilot's seat, his crystalline body showing more fractures than before. The rough launch hadn't helped his condition. The communications system crackled to life as they cleared the worst of the interference. Riley, it was Orthan's voice, tight with something between anger and fear. What did you do down there? The entire planet is destabilizing. We're reading massive energy output, electromagnetic pulses, and gravitational anomalies. Whatever you triggered, I didn't trigger anything. Riley cut him off. She wrestled with the controls as another shudder ran through the shuttle. The planet is hatching. There's something inside it, something alive. It was waking up whether I went down there or not. Hatching? That's impossible. Riley glanced at the viewport behind her. The planet's surface was breaking apart in huge sections now, lifting away like pieces of a shell. Underneath, light and energy poured out, colors that hurt to look at directly. Tell that to the giant thing coming out of it. Orthan's voice went quiet for a moment. Then, Riley, we need to evacuate the station. That energy output is scrambling our systems. Half our engines are offline. We can't maintain orbital position much longer. Where are the crew? Still aboard. The escape pod launch sequence failed when the first energy pulse hit. We're working on manual overrides, but it's taking time. Riley checked her trajectory. She was on course to reach Meridian, 7 in 8 minutes. The shuttle's engines were holding together, barely. But the readouts showed the landing gear situation was worse than she thought. Not just damaged. Gone. Torn completely away during the emergency launch. Word hen, I've got a problem. My landing gear is destroyed. I can't dock normally. Then get to an escape pod when you reach us. Abandon the shuttle. And Hallis. Silence on the other end. Then, Riley, he's unconscious. You can't move him through the station quickly enough. By the time you get him to medical and then to an escape pod, the evacuation window will be closed. Riley looked at Hallis. His breathing was shallow, his crystalline structure showing stress fractures that spread even as she watched. Without proper medical care soon, those fractures would reach critical organs. He'd shatter from the inside. Not acceptable, Riley said. That's not your decision to make anymore. You're relieved of duty, remember? I'm ordering you to save yourself. Your orders don't seem to stick with me, Commander. Riley cut the communication and focused on the problem. Manual docking without landing gear. Every pilot was trained to say it couldn't be done. The docking port required precise alignment, and the landing gear provided the final adjustments and secure lock. Without them, you were trying to thread a needle while both the needle and thread were moving. But Riley had landed shuttles in hurricane winds. She'd touched down on cliff sides with one engine dead. She'd done a lot of things that training said were impossible. She just needed to be more impossible than usual. Meridian, 7 grew larger in her viewport. The station was shaking, its orbit degrading from the gravitational anomalies the primordial was creating. She could see escape pods drifting away from the port side, their launches successful. But the starboard side, the side facing the planet, showed dark pods still locked in their berths. Riley aimed for the main docking bay. The automated guidance system tried to engage, failed, and filled her screen with error messages. She shut it down and switched to manual controls. Just her hands, her eyes, and physics. The shuttle approached the docking port at an angle that would have failed any training simulation. Riley adjusted thrust with tiny bursts, watching the alignment markers on her screen. The station was rotating slowly, adding another variable to the equation. The shuttle was tumbling slightly from the damage it had sustained. She had one chance. Maybe Riley's hands moved across the controls with absolute precision. She wasn't thinking anymore, just reacting, letting instinct and training merge into something beyond both. The shuttle twisted, aligned, and she fired the final thrust. The shuttle slammed into the docking port with bone-jarring force. Riley's teeth clicked together hard enough to hurt. Hallis made a pained sound, but didn't wake. The airlock groaned, metal scraping against metal, and then the seals engaged, barely. Riley checked the pressure differential. The seal was holding, but the damaged shuttle hull was venting atmosphere from a dozen small ruptures. She had maybe 10 minutes before the whole thing failed catastrophically. Good enough, she muttered. She unstrapped Hallis and lifted him again. Her back protested, muscles already strained from lifting the console back on the planet. She ignored the pain and moved toward the airlock. The inner door opened to reveal Pip and 2 other Fenari researchers. Their eyes went huge when they saw Hallis. Medical gurney now, Riley said. They already had one. The small fox-like beings moved with surprising efficiency, getting Hallis secured and starting preliminary treatment. Riley stumbled after them as they ran through the corridors toward the medical bay. That's when Orthen intercepted them. The Paulian commander stood in the corridor, flanked by two security officers. Bryn and Wes were from aquatic species, strong but slow in their pressure suits. They moved to block the path. "You violated direct orders," Orthen said. His carapace was dark red, the color of Paulian fury. "You endangered this entire station. You're relieved of duty and confined to quarters immediately." Riley didn't argue. She was too tired for arguments. Hallis needs medical attention first. After he's stable, "I'll go wherever you want." She tried to step around him. The security officers moved to grab her. That's when the entire station lurched sideways like it had been hit by a giant fist. Everyone grabbed for handholds. The medical gurney slid into a wall. Emergency klaxons started blaring, adding to the noise and chaos. Through the speakers, Quinn's voice shouted from the pilot station. "Commander, the Primordial just released another energy pulse. It's propagating through subspace. Our engines are failing." Orthen's anger shifted instantly to fear. "How long until we lose orbital position?" 30 minutes, maybe less." The argument became pointless immediately. Riley let go of the handhold and grabbed the medical gurney before it could slide again. Orthen was already running toward the command center, shouting orders. Riley and the Fenari researchers got Hallis to medical. The automated systems started working on him immediately, sealing fractures and stabilizing his crystalline structure. Riley watched for a moment, making sure he was in good hands, then headed back to the command center. She might be relieved of duty, but she wasn't going to sit in quarters while people died. The command center was chaos. Crew members from a dozen species crowded around displays, trying to fix the engine problems. Quinn was at the pilot station, working controls that were only half responding. Orthen saw Riley enter, but didn't order her out. Too much else was going wrong. "Escape, but status," Orthen demanded. "Port side pods are launching successfully," someone reported. "Starboard pods are still showing critical malfunctions." The energy pulse fried their automated systems. Riley pushed through to look at the display. She'd worked with the escape pod systems during safety drills. She could see the problem immediately. The starboard pods needed manual override commands, specific sequences that bypassed the failed automation. But they'd need someone at the main control console to execute each launch individually. "How many people still need evacuation?" Riley asked. 16, Quinn said. "And there are exactly 16 malfunctioning pods." Riley did the math. Manual launches with 17-second gaps between each. That was 4 minutes and 32 seconds of continuous work at the console. The station would begin atmospheric entry in 28 minutes. The person at the console wouldn't be able to reach an escape pod themselves. Riley looked at Orthen. Their eyes met. The commander understood what she was thinking before she said it. "No," he said. "Absolutely not. We'll find another way." But Riley was already moving toward the console. Sometimes the math was simple, even when the answer was hard. Riley sat down at the main control console before anyone could physically stop her. Her fingers moved across the controls, initializing the manual override sequence. Around her, the command center erupted in argument. "This is insane," Orthen said. "I want to authorize a suicide mission." "Good thing I'm already court-martialed then," Riley said without looking up. "Your authorization doesn't matter anymore." Quinn left the pilot station and grabbed Riley's shoulder. The Verity pilot was taller than Riley, with 4 arms and a face that looked almost human except for the silver eyes. "There has to be another way. We can reroute power, try to fix the automated systems. We don't have time." Riley pulled up the evacuation roster. 16 names, 16 species, all waiting for pods that wouldn't launch without manual commands. The station hits atmosphere in 26 minutes. Manual launches take 4.5 minutes. That leaves 21 minutes for everyone to get clear before the trajectory becomes irrecoverable. "And what about you?" Quinn's voice cracked. "I'll figure something out." It was a lie. They all knew it was a lie. But Riley started the sequence anyway. "All personnel, report to assigned escape pods immediately. Port side only." Launch sequence begins in 90 seconds. She heard footsteps running in the corridors outside, heard voices calling out in languages from a dozen worlds, heard Pip crying somewhere nearby. The young Fenari appeared in the doorway, her fox-like face wet with tears. "You can't do this," Pip said. "You saved Dr. Hallis. You can't just... We can't leave you." Riley finally looked up from the console. She tried to smile, but wasn't sure it worked. "Your people have a saying, right? The burrow survives when one stands at the entrance." Riley had heard Pip quote it during a night shift once, talking about Fenari War and defense traditions. "I'm standing at the entrance. That's for soldiers defending against attacks. Not for this. Same principle." Riley turned back to the console. "Get to your pod, Pip. That's an order." "Well, it would be if I still had authority to give orders." Pip stood there for another few seconds. Then she ran. Riley heard her small footsteps disappearing down the corridor and felt something tight in her chest. 60 seconds to first launch, Riley announced. The crew was moving fast now. Riley watched the internal sensors, tracking life signs as people reached their assigned pods. Some are faster than others. The aquatic species struggled with their pressure suits. The small ones had farther to run with shorter legs. But they were all moving. Orthen appeared beside the console. He didn't try to stop her anymore. "For what it's worth," he said quietly, "I was wrong. About the rescue. About you. Yeah, well, I was insubordinate. So we're both right and both wrong." Riley's hands hovered over the launch controls. "Get to your pod, Commander. I'm staying to help. The sequence is single operator. Multiple inputs will just cause conflicts." Riley met his eyes. "And I need someone to make sure everyone else gets out." "That's your job." Orthen's carapace shifted through several colors before settling on a pale blue Riley didn't recognize. He reached out with one claw and touched her shoulder gently. "The universe is better with Deathworlders in it," he said. "Even stubborn ones who don't follow orders." Then he left. Riley started the launch sequence. Pod 1. Drez and Talon, the Bryn researchers. She verified their life signs, confirmed trajectory calculations, and overrode the safety protocols that were trying to prevent launch. The pod shot away from the station. Through the external cameras, Riley watched it join the growing cluster of earlier launches. 17 seconds. Pod 2. She fell into a rhythm. Verify, confirm, override, launch. 17 seconds. Next pod. The station shook around her. The Primordial's energy pulses were getting stronger. Through the main viewport, she could see the planet below had transformed into something like a flower opening, petals of rock and light spreading outward. Pod 7 launched. Pod 8. Pod 9. Riley's hands moved with mechanical precision. She didn't let herself think about what came after. Just the next pod, the next sequence, the next 17 seconds. Through the corridor windows, she saw crew members passing. Some stopped to press hands or appendages against the glass. She nodded to them, never stopping her work. Hallis went past on a medical gurney, barely conscious. He managed to turn his head, his crystalline eyes finding her through the window. "Thank you, Deathworlder," she heard him rasp over the intercom. "Thank the universe I'm stubborn," Riley called back. Pod 12. Pod 15. Pod 14. The station lurched hard. Riley grabbed the console to keep from being thrown out of her seat. The orbital decay was accelerating. Through the viewport, she could see the planet's atmosphere starting to glow at the edges of her vision. They were getting pulled in. Pod 15 launched. One more. The last pod held Quinn. The Verity pilot had argued the longest about staying, but Riley had ordered her into the pod with the kind of voice that didn't allow argument. The same voice Riley had used on Earth when leading survival groups through disasters. Pod 16 verified. Life signs confirmed. Trajectory calculated. Riley's finger hovered over the launch control. She thought about the damaged shuttle she'd docked. It was still attached, or what was left of it. The engines were partially functional. Maybe if she ran there now, if everything went perfectly, she could undock and limp away from the station before atmospheric entry became irreversible. Maybe, low probability, but not zero. Her hand moved to launch Quinn's pod. The station shook again. The console sparked, damaged circuits failing. Through the viewport, The primordial was fully visible now, a cosmic organism of impossible beauty spreading across the sky. Energy cascaded from its form and colors that didn't exist in nature. Riley realized something. She might be the only human who would ever witness this moment. The only one to see a primordial emerge from its ancient sleep. That was worth something. She pressed the launch control. Pod 16 shot away from the station, joining the others in their retreat to a safe distance. Riley sat back in her chair and watched the primordial bloom across the sky. "Not a bad last sight," she whispered. The station's orbital decay alarm hit critical. Atmospheric entry would begin in 4 minutes. Riley stood up from the console. The damaged shuttle was a 3-minute run through corridors that were coming apart. She could try that, or she could do something else. Riley pulled up the station's data core controls. Everything Meridian 7 had recorded, every piece of research, every observation. She found the external cameras and aimed them at the primordial. Then she opened a recording channel. "This is Security Officer Riley Moss' final log entry." Her voice was steady. "To whoever recovers Meridian 7's data core, what you're about to see is a primordial emergence. Study it. Learn from it." She paused, watching the cosmic flower spread its impossible petals. "And know that 47 people survived today, because sometimes the right thing to do is exactly what you're told not to do." Riley turned the cameras to capture every angle of the primordial. The station was burning now, atmospheric friction beginning to tear at the outer hull. She ignored it and kept recording that if she was going to die, at least it would mean something. The primordial's light filled the viewport, beautiful and terrible and ancient beyond measure. Riley smiled. Then she ran for the damaged shuttle anyway, because dying was acceptable, but giving up never was. Riley's boots hammered against the deck plating as she ran. The station screamed around her, metal tearing and atmosphere venting. She had maybe 3 minutes before atmospheric entry became irreversible. The damaged shuttle was 2 minutes and 40 seconds away at a dead run. The math was tight, but possible. She jumped a gap where the floor had buckled, rolled through a hatch that was trying to close, and kept running. Her lungs burned. Her legs burned. Everything burned. But Earth had taught her that pain was just information, and you could choose to ignore information. The corridor to the shuttle bay was coming apart. She could see space through cracks in the hull. The primordial's light painting everything in colors that hurt to look at. Riley didn't slow down. She hit the shuttle bay with 90 seconds to spare. The damaged shuttle hung in its docking port like a broken toy. Half the hull was scorched. The engines were probably about 30% functional. The life support would last maybe an hour, but it had engines, and that meant it could move. Riley threw herself through the airlock and strapped into the pilot's seat. Her hands flew across the controls, initializing systems that screamed warnings at her. The docking clamps wouldn't release normally. She overrode them, feeling the shuttle tear free with a groan of tortured metal. The engines fired. Barely. One sputtered and died immediately. The other 2 coughed to life and pushed the shuttle away from the dying station at a speed that could charitably be called glacial. Through the viewport, Riley watched Meridian 7 tilt into its death spiral. The station hit the upper atmosphere and started to burn. The data core would survive, designed to withstand atmospheric entry. Her recording would make it to the surface. The shuttle limped away at barely escape velocity. Riley checked the trajectory and felt her heart sink. The energy pulses from the primordial had scrambled the navigation systems. She was moving away from the station, but not toward the escape pods. Her vector was wrong by about 40 degrees. She tried to correct. The engines coughed, and one more died. "Okay," Riley said to the empty shuttle. "New plan." The remaining engine had maybe 20 minutes of fuel. Not enough to reach the escape pods. Not enough to achieve a stable orbit around the transformed planet. But maybe, if she was very precise and very lucky, enough to reach a degrading orbit that would last a few days instead of a few hours. She did the calculations in her head. Fired the engine in careful bursts. Watch her trajectory shift by degrees. The engine sputtered out with 18 seconds of burn time left unused. Riley watched the numbers on her display and felt a strange calm settle over her. she'd achieved a stable-ish orbit. The shuttle would stay in space for maybe 3 weeks before orbital decay pulled it down to the planet. 3 weeks for someone to maybe find her. Long odds. But she'd survived long odds before. Riley checked the life support. The atmosphere scrubbers were damaged but functional. She had maybe 5 days of breathable air if she stayed awake. Or she could use the emergency medical bay to put herself in a cold sleep, which would extend that to, she did the math, maybe 40 days if she was lucky and nothing else broke. Cold sleep it is. She climbed out of the pilot's seat and moved to the small medical alcove at the back of the shuttle. The emergency stasis pod was designed for trauma patients, meant to keep someone alive long enough to reach a proper hospital. It wasn't designed for long-term storage, but Riley had learned on Earth that equipment could be pushed beyond its design specifications if you were willing to accept the risks. She programmed the pod for maximum conservation mode, dropped her core temperature to just above brain damage levels, slowed her metabolism to barely alive. The pod systems complained that this was outside safe parameters. Riley ignored the warnings and climbed inside. The pod sealed. Drugs flooded her system, pulling her down into darkness. Her last thought was about the primordial, spreading its cosmic petals across the sky. Beautiful. Then nothing. Silence and cold, and the slow tick of a failing system counting down the days. 3 weeks later, a deep space survey vessel called the Wanderer's Path detected unusual debris in orbit around the transformed planet. The captain, a cautious Telvin named Bras, almost ignored it. They were mapping the primordial's effects on the local space, not looking for salvage, but something about the debris pattern caught his attention. Too regular, too deliberate. Run a closer scan, he ordered. The sensor operator, a human named Sarah, brought up enhanced imaging. Her eyes went wide. Captain, that's not debris. That's a shuttle, and it's running on emergency power. Life signs. 1. Very faint. Hypothermic stasis, if I'm reading this right. Sarah looked up from her display. Captain, they've been out here for weeks. How is anyone still alive? Bras made a decision. Recovery team. Full medical support. And hurry. They brought the damaged shuttle aboard carefully. The hull was barely holding together, covered in scorch marks and peppered with micrometeorite impacts. When they opened the airlock, they found the interior frozen, all power diverted to the medical pod. Inside the pod was Riley. Her core temperature dropped to levels that would have killed most species outright. Her heart rate was 4 beats per minute. Her brain activity was barely detectable. Get her to medical now, the Wanderer's Path medical officer shouted. And someone contact Tyros 3. Tell them we need their full trauma team ready. They loaded Riley onto their ship and jumped to faster-than-light speed, racing toward the nearest major medical facility. Behind them, the primordial continued its work, transforming a dead world into something new and alive. That Riley's damaged shuttle was left in orbit, a piece of debris that would eventually fall and burn. But by then, its pilot would be far away, fighting a different kind of battle. The battle to survive what should have killed her. The medical team on Tyros 3 worked for 19 hours straight. Species from a dozen worlds contributed techniques. Desert dwellers shared thermal regulation methods. Aquatic species provided circulatory support. Telepathic species helped stimulate neural pathways. And in the middle of it all was Dr. Hallis, his crystalline structure still showing faint fracture lines from his own rescue. He refused to leave, working alongside the others with intensity. She saved my life, he said when someone suggested he should rest. I'm returning the favor. Slowly, degree by degree, they brought Riley's temperature up. They restarted systems that had been shut down for weeks. They fought for every heartbeat, every breath, every tiny sign of neural activity. On the 19th hour, Riley's eyes opened. The first thing she saw was Pip's face, the young Fenari holding her hand and crying. Did everyone make it? Riley's voice was barely a whisper, her throat damaged from the cold. Pip nodded frantically, tears flowing freely. All 47. Everyone's safe. Riley closed her eyes again. Good. Worth it then. She slept for 3 days after that, real sleep instead of stasis. When she woke properly, She found herself in a hospital room filled with flowers and gifts from species she'd helped save. Messages from crew members. A formal commendation from the Interspecies Council. And in the corner, waiting patiently, was Commander Orten. "Thought you were dead," he said simply. "So did I," Riley admitted. "What now?" "Now you face a disciplinary hearing for insubordination." Orthan's carapace showed colors Riley had learned meant humor. "And then you get assigned to train other Deathworlders in emergency response. Turns out we need more people who are willing to refuse orders when those orders are wrong." Riley laughed, which hurt her still recovering lungs. "You're actually rewarding insubordination? We're learning from it." Orten stood. "Rest, Riley. You've earned it." He left. Riley lay back in a hospital bed and smiled at the ceiling. Sometimes being stubborn paid off. 6 months after the Meridian 7 incident, Riley stood in front of a classroom on Tyro's 3 station. 17 students sat in the training room, watching her with varying expressions. 14 of them were human. The other 3 were from species that had specifically requested Deathworlder training. Riley looked at them and remembered her first day in Earth's wilderness survival program. The instructor had said something she'd never forgotten. Survival isn't about being the strongest or the smartest. It's about being too stubborn to die when the universe says you should. She decided to start with that. "Welcome to Emergency Response Training, Deathworlder Edition," Riley began. "I'm Rilimos. 6 months ago, I violated direct orders, stole a shuttle, rescued a scientist from exploding planet, and then refused to evacuate a dying space station until everyone else was safe. Then I almost froze to death in orbit." The students shifted in their seats. One of the humans, a young man from Earth's Arctic regions, raised his hand. "Why are you telling us this? Aren't you supposed to teach us to follow protocol?" "No," Riley said. "I'm here to teach you when to break it." She pulled up a display showing the Meridian 7 timeline, the evacuation order, her descent to the planet, the rescue, the manual pod launches, the whole story laid out in data points and timestamps. "Every decision I made violated standard operating procedure," Riley said. "And 47 people are alive because of it. So the question isn't whether to follow orders. The question is knowing when the orders are wrong." A Fenari student, older than Pip, but with the same fox-like features, spoke up. "How do you know? How do you decide when to refuse?" Riley thought about it. About standing on the Meridian 7 command deck, watching Orten order her to abandon Hallis. About the moment she chose to walk toward the shuttle anyway. "You know, because the math changes when lives are at stake," she said finally. "Risk versus reward. Cost versus benefit. When command makes decisions based on acceptable losses, sometimes you have to be the one who decides no loss is acceptable." She advanced the display to show the primordial's emergence. The cosmic organisms spreading across space, beautiful and terrible. This footage was recovered from Meridian 7's data core. It's the most complete recording of a primordial emergence ever captured. Scientists from 80 species are studying it right now. That research is saving lives, advancing understanding of the universe. Riley paused. "I recorded this while the station burned around me because I chose to document something important instead of running immediately for the shuttle. Was that smart? No. Did it serve a purpose beyond my own survival? Yes." The Arctic human raised his hand again. "But you survived anyway." "That was luck." "Partly," Riley admitted. "But I also calculated my odds, pushed equipment beyond its limits, and made choices that gave me the best chance. The stasis pod wasn't designed for what I did with it, but I understood the principles well enough to modify the parameters." She looked at each student in turn. "That's what this training is about. Understanding systems well enough to break them safely. Knowing your own limits well enough to exceed them when necessary. And developing the judgment to know when necessary is actually necessary and not just reckless." Over the next weeks, Riley put them through scenarios that normal training would never include. Rescues with impossible time limits. Evacuations with insufficient resources. Emergencies where protocol said to abandon people, and they had to decide whether to follow that protocol. She taught them Earth survival techniques. how to assess risk with imperfect information, how to push human physiology beyond its supposed limits, how to make decisions in seconds that would save lives. One day, Orthen visited the class. He watched from the back while Riley ran a simulation. A station fire with crew members trapped on the wrong side. Standard procedure said to seal the section and let them die to save the majority. Riley's students refused. They found solutions, cutting through walls, using emergency suits in ways the manual said not to, creating pressure differentials that shouldn't work but did. After class, Orthen approached Riley. "You're teaching them to be insubordinate." "I'm teaching them to think," Riley corrected. "Insubordination is just what it looks like from the outside." "The Interspecies Council is watching this program carefully," Orthen said. "Some members think you're creating a problem. Others think you're solving one we didn't know we had." "And what do you think?" Orthen's carapace showed thoughtful colors. "I think the galaxy is safer with Deathworlders who know when to refuse orders. Just don't make me regret saying that." Riley grinned. "No promises, Commander." The training program expanded. More humans volunteered. More species requested to learn Deathworlder techniques. Riley found herself training not just emergency responders, but security officers, pilots, and medical personnel. Anyone who might face a moment where the rules said one thing and survival said another. Pip visited sometimes, now working as a full researcher studying the transformed planet that the Primordial had created. They'd named it New Genesis, and it was beautiful beyond description. Life was spreading across its surface at impossible speeds, evolution accelerated by the cosmic organism's presence. "Dr. Hallis says your recordings are revolutionary," Pip told Riley during one visit. "Universities across 80 species are using them to understand primordial biology." "How is Hallis?" Riley asked. "Recovered. Back to work. He asks about you." Pip's ears flicked forward in the Finari expression of curiosity. "He wants to know if you'll return to New Genesis, to study what you helped preserve." Riley considered it. Part of her wanted to see the planet again, to witness what had emerged from that cosmic egg. But another part of her knew where she was needed. "Maybe someday," she said. "Right now I'm doing what I'm good at, teaching people to survive impossible situations. By being impossible yourself," Pip said with a small smile. Exactly. 1 year after Meridian 7, the Interspecies Council formally changed their emergency response protocols. Deathworlder officers were granted broader, discretionary authority. The acceptable loss calculations were revised to weight individual lives more heavily. And a new position was created, Special Circumstances Advisor. They offered it to Riley. She turned it down. "I'm not an advisor," she told the council representatives. "I'm a trainer, and I'm good at it." Instead, she recommended a joint human-alien oversight committee. People who understood both standard protocols and when those protocols needed to break. The council agreed. Riley continued teaching. Her students graduated and took positions across the galaxy. They became known for a particular approach to emergencies. Creative, stubborn, willing to take calculated risks that others wouldn't consider. They called it the Moss Protocol, though Riley hated the name. On the first anniversary of Meridian 7's destruction, Riley stood at the observation window of Tyros 3 and looked toward the sector where New Genesis bloomed. She thought about the day she refused to stand down, the day she decided one life was worth the risk. Behind her, a new class of students waited for their first lesson. Humans from every continent on Earth. 3 Finari, 2 Palians, a Verity, even a Quillan, inspired by Hallis's survival. Riley turned from the window and faced them. "Lesson 1, she said. "Sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is exactly what you're told." "Lesson 2, if you're going to disobey orders, make sure you're right." "Lesson 3, she smiled, remembering the moment she walked away from Orthen's direct command and toward a shuttle that would change everything. "Deathworlders don't get second chances, so make the first one count." The students leaned forward, ready to learn what it meant to be impossible. Outside the window, a supply ship arrived carrying more volunteers. More humans ready to serve in the galaxy. More beings ready to learn that sometimes saving lives meant breaking rules. Riley watched them dock and felt something close to pride. The universe was changing. Humans were teaching other species that survival sometimes required being unreasonable. And at the center of it all was one stubborn security officer who had refused to stand down when everyone said she should. The galaxy was better for it that on her desk sat a small crystal sculpture from Dr. Hallis. A human figure carved from the same crystalline material as Quillen bones, standing firm while the world crumbled around her. Beneath it, an inscription in multiple languages. For the one who stood at the entrance. Riley touched it gently, then turned back to her students. There was work to do, people to train, lives to save. And somewhere out in the cosmos, a primordial bloomed on New Genesis, transforming a dead world into paradise. All because one human decided that following orders wasn't as important as saving a life. The Deathworlder was told to stand down. She refused, and everyone else fell into their escape pods safely. The end.